forget remaps. If you want to be fast on the road, it's all about the chassis. Hello and welcome back to the Volks Wizard channel. Now I've had my Mk7.5 Golf GTD Estate for about 3 months now, and I've done 3,000 very happy miles in it. I've got to say it's probably one of the best cars I've ever owned for its combination of practicality, economy, performance, value for money, and I think in tungsten silver it looks pretty classy as well, which isn't always the case with diesel estate cars. However, it's not perfect. Not many cars are. There are a couple of things I've wanted to change. The first thing I changed were the wheels back in about November when I swapped them for some 19-inch BBS wheels, which, going by the comments on Instagram, that was a little bit Marmite. Well, guess what? I've changed them again. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. Firstly, I want to talk about the other thing I want to change, which is the dampers. When this car was new, it had a very fine handling chassis that wasn't that different to that of, say, the Mk7 Golf GTI Clubsport S. We've got multi-link suspension, we've got sports setting for the dampers and the springs. However, this car is now 5 years old and a bit, and it's done 130,000 miles. And whilst it still feels okay, it's quite clear that some new dampers will make it drive a lot better, possibly even better than it left the factory, because I can spend more on some dampers than Volkswagen did when they were making the car. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to swap those knackered old dampers for Bilstein's B6 dampers. That's the best quality Bilstein damper you can use with the original spring. So we're not going to lower the car, because that will make it handle better on track, but worse on a British B road. And this is not a track car, though it would be fun to give it a try. So let's get started by talking about the tools we need to swap the rear dampers for Bilstein's B6. Now it's the time in the video where I like to remind you guys how you can support the channel. The easiest way to do that is simply to subscribe. We're still getting loads of views from non-subscribers, and it's absolutely brilliant to get those views, but it'd be even more brilliant if you could subscribe as well. I'm sure you know how to do that by now. The other way to support the channel and for you to benefit as well is to sell me your good Volkswagen Group car. I'm still buying for a very reputable dealer, and their really good reputation means they can sell the best cars for the highest prices, and that means we can pay the best prices for the best cars. So if you've got the best version of your Volkswagen Group performance car, then get in touch. By that I mean cars up to 5 years old with a full history, unmodified, a higher than average spec and an average mileage, or ideally below. We're looking for performance Golf, so GTIs, possibly really high spec, low mileage, low owner Rs, Audi S and RS, and recently we've started looking at SUVs as well, so something like Tiguan R-Line, Q5 S-Line, again up to 5 years, full history, unmodified, etc. If you've got anything like that, or anything interesting, a nice Audi R8, a nice Porsche Boxster even, then get in touch with me directly, andrew@volkswizard.co.uk. Okay, let's start off then by talking about the tools needed to do the job. Now in this video I'm only going to cover the rear shocks, because I've already done a video where I swapped the front shocks on my Clubsport S, and the process is identical on the GTD, so I'll put a link to that video in the description of this one. The backs though are nice and easy and really enjoyable for a DIY mechanic to do on their driveway. You need an axle stand to raise the car up safely, or keep it up safely once you've raised it with a trolley jack. You need something to undo the wheel bolts with. I've got this breaker bar and I put them back on with a torque wrench, but you don't really need to. A 17mm socket for the wheel nuts. And then you can get the wheel arch liner off using a T25 socket, probably about 6, 7, 8 screws. Have a good look in the wheel arch area. You'll find mud has built up in places. You might even find corrosion, so be prepared to protect that, like I've had to on my car. And then you can undo the bolts holding the shock to the car. One at the bottom, two at the top. You need to support the rear arm with the jack, and then you can undo the bolt holding the shock to the rear arm using two 18mm sockets, or an 18mm spanner and an 18mm socket. So because you need to, you have to hold the bolt head to undo the nut, otherwise it will just spin round. Actually undo that, but leave the bolt in, and then get onto the two 16mm at the top in the wheel arch. Yeah, so just a 60mm socket for that. And it's a good idea to have a bar, because you can lever it a bit when you're positioning it to rebuild it, because to align it can be quite difficult. Once you've got the strut off though, you need to take the top mount off, and for that you need a 60mm socket. There must be a tool for this, but I haven't got it, so I've had to improvise. I actually gripped the piston of the old shock with microfiber and some pliers, and undid it using this 16mm socket. There's nothing, it's really hard to grip the original ones because they're just a flat sort of tip to them. The Bilsteins thankfully take a 5mm Allen key, which should be here, but it's not. You can hold the shock with that. Oh, yeah, there it is, 5mm Allen key. So just put that in there like that, and you can hold this socket in place with this. So you might have to bodge it to undo it, but putting it back together, you can actually do it pretty professionally. So I hold it with that, and I go in through there with that, and that seems to work really well. I've got some flat blade screwdriver, because you always need that, and I use that for getting the dust cover off, because you have to swap that over to the new shock. And the cable tie holding that to the top mount, so I cut that with that. And you need a couple of cable ties. Hammer's always useful, just to sort of leave things into position. And I think that is that. Some grease is good. I've greased all my bolts and reassembly just to stop them corroding into the car. A light's useful, so you can actually see the T25s in the wheel arch to undo them to get the liner off. And that is it. Okay, so these are the parts I'm fitting: Bilstein B6 front and rear shocks. The back one looks really similar to the original, just yellow. This looks the same width, and so does the piston. While this one at the front looks very, very different, and hopefully this is representative of the improved damping. So yeah, they're pretty similar down here. They obviously fit in the hub, so the same width. But look at the, I mean, that's a beefy piston, but look at that. Now don't do what I did and have a heart attack when you try and swap over the bump stop, because you'll never get that on there because it's so much wider. When I read the instructions, it said you don't need to carry over the bump stop. It's got built-in bump stop. Why haven't people done that before? It makes a lot of sense to put it within the damper. All you have to do is carry over the dust cover. So yeah, let's get fitting them on my Golf GTD Estate. Okay, with the car still on the ground, start off by loosening the wheel bolts. If they're really tight, you'll never be able to do that with the car raised. Once they're loose, get your jack underneath the jacking point on the sill, which is pretty visible on Mk7 7.5, and raise it in the air. And now you can fully remove the wheel bolts. Because you're going to have your head in the wheel arch, undoing the wheel arch liner screws, you need to place an axle stand under the rear suspension. There is a good solid bar, which seems perfect for axle stands. Now, avoiding any stray cats, make sure you remove the wheel arch liner, because you won't be able to access the two bolts that retain the shock absorber into the body. Unless you do that, you'll find there's a lot of mud on the liner and quite a lot of mud behind it as well. So it's a good time, maybe once you finish the job, to give that area a good clean and check for corrosion. Then take up the spring pressure by putting a jack underneath the rear arm, and now you can start loosening the nut and bolt that hold the rear shock to the suspension arm. And then with that removed, you can now undo the two 16mm bolts that hold the shock into the body. It's as simple as that, but you haven't finished yet, because you've got to swap some bits over from the old shock to the new one. Firstly, you need to remove the cable tie that holds the dust cover to the old top mount, and then you need to remove the old top mount. Now, I used a mole grips on the piston and the microfiber not to damage it and the socket, but there's probably a proper tool for it. With the top mount off, it's a good idea to give it a good clean. Now, for reassembly, I didn't need to use the mole grips on the piston. I used a socket and a chisel in the little hole on the side of the socket, and then I was able to hold the piston still using the 5mm Allen key. The standard shock doesn't have an Allen key hole in the top of the piston. It's like a flat piece, which is really hard to hold, but these are much easier to assemble. And then just reverse what you did to remove it. So 16mm bolts in the top, then the 18mm nut and bolt, and yeah, give the area a good clean. It's amazing how much crap gets behind the wheel arch liner. And on my car, I did actually find a bit of corrosion, so I treated it with some Bilstein Dynax S50, which is a little bit more hardcore than the Dynax you see I've used in other videos, and it goes on brown, which is fine on the cars you're not really that precious about. And also the benefit of that is that you can actually see where you've sprayed it. With Dynax, you see it's so clear, it's easy to lose track of where it's gone on the car. With that done, it's time to reinsert the wheel arch liner, making sure you refit all the screws you've taken out, a couple of which are hidden. So it's always a good idea to get a light and check inside the wheel arch liner to make sure you've put them all back. And now it's time to perform a test drive and see if all that work was worth the effort. Well guys, welcome to the first drive in my 7.5 GTD Estate, now equipped with Bilstein B6 dampers. I'm very lucky that within a mile of where I live there are some great roads, and it doesn't take an awful lot of driving to feel the difference. And the next corner is sort of key to that. With a standard suspension, the car almost bottoms out. With these B6s, it just flies through. Much better body control, and I'm pretty sure the steering, which felt a bit vague before, now feels a little bit more communicative, because instead of compressing, you're kind of pushing against the pressure of the damper now, so it just gives the steering a little bit more weight rather than just feeling a little bit light and vague. Under braking as well, we get less pitch, which can only be a good thing. And also when you get back on the gas, the car wants to go backwards, and because the rear shocks are stiffer, you don't get as much of that, so you get better traction as well. Important with this car because it's quite torquey, we don't have a VAQ diff like the higher performance GTIs. Also, there are no rattles. When you fit coilovers, quite often you do get rattles. This car feels perfectly normal. I fitted some new Febby Bilstein top mounts to the front as well. Other than that, there's nothing else really you need to renew, and ride quality doesn't feel any different. Are there any disadvantages then? Well, they cost quite a lot of money. Aside from that though, the ride height. Now, somebody said on Instagram it looks higher when I posted a picture of it, IKEA in Milton Keynes. I didn't think it would affect the ride height, because to get myself out of the problem with the piece of wood that wouldn't compress with the new suspension, I had to put a shock on without a spring, and the car was pretty much on the ground, so I couldn't see how a shock could affect the ride height, but I'm pretty sure it's a few mil higher than it used to be. So bear that in mind. It used to sit perfectly. With 19s now, it might look a little bit stupid, which is just as well. I've taken them off, but more on that in a sec. So aside from that, there's not really an awful lot to complain about. It just feels so much nicer. I drove my Clubsport yesterday. It feels not dissimilar to that car, ride and handling. That's a DCC car, so in normal mode it feels pretty similar to that. It's not as hard as race mode for sure, but you can just feel so confident in these corners, even in slimy winter conditions like this. I'm not going to brake. Mid-corner bump there, and there's actually another mid-corner bump on the exit of this sequence. I'll let this car go so we can get a bit of speed up. Where when I did the original test drive in this car, I kind of demonstrated how much it floated. So we're going 60 miles an hour. Beautiful. Just goes over the crest, comes down and stays stable. It's like a different car. So there you go. Forget remaps. If you want to be fast on the road, it's all about the chassis. And I enjoyed that so much. I'm going to go do it again. So we're in sport mode, which gives us a bit of a fake sound. I'm in manual shifting mode now, and I just want to feel connected to this car. I had a Seat Leon Estate with basically the same setup, but it didn't have multilink rear suspension like this car, and you just couldn't gel with it. I'm approaching this corner now at 60. The conditions are not good. I'm at 60, and oh my god, it just feels amazing. So this is a real sleeper car, which is right up my street. You know, if I see Porsches or BMWs now, there's no doubt about it, on the road, I'll be up your trumpets. Okay, now, let's calm down and talk about why I've changed the wheels again. firstly, let's start then with a little game. Can you recognise these wheels? Okay, full marks to those who recognise them as the original Seville wheels that come on the GTD, but don't be embarrassed if you couldn't recognise them because they look so different. So in their standard finish, they are diamond cut and black, and all you really see are the two spokes of the wheel because everything else is black. But now they're silver. You can see there's actually a lot more going on with the wheel. There's some inner bits and they go out to the edge of the wheel, and together I think they look like the best 18-inch wheel that's ever been available on 7 or 7.5, as long as they're in silver. I didn't actually realise until I was doing a bit of research that there is a Seville wheel that was an option that was 18-inch that was black with the red rim. That's where I've seen them before, but yeah, I think in silver they look pretty damn good. Now the reason they're silver is because these are my winter wheels. So the BBS went on in the autumn, but as soon as the weather got a bit cold and frosty in December, I switched to these because they're fitted with Goodyear's 4 Seasons Vector Gen 3 all-season tyres, which I've had on my cars during the winter for the past couple of years. It's just a bonus that they look so good in silver, and I'm so happy with them that the BBS wheels are now for sale. So they've got really good Pirelli tyres, they're in really good condition, the odd little mark here and there, and they come with the bolts, and I think I can give you some gloss black nut caps as well. And they're £999, and depending where you are, I should be able to deliver them to you in this car for that price. And I think now I see the car sits a little bit higher. I don't think they'd look as good anyway, but also, you know, I want the car to be as efficient as possible, so I think these tyres are more efficient than the Pirellis. They're 225, not 235 as well, and I want the ride quality to be as good. Now the Pirellis and those 19s didn't seem to affect the ride that much, but I think now with the Bilsteins, these wheels, these tyres, at least during the sort of winter and, you know, not until the weather warms up a bit, I think this car is at its optimum now, and it's so enjoyable to drive. So yeah, it looks great, it looks pretty standard, and it drives just so well, and it still does over 50 to the gallon. So as ever guys, thanks for watching this Volkswizard video. If you're interested in the wheels, get in touch with me directly, andrew@volkswizard.co.uk. Keep commenting, keep subscribing, and I'll see you for the next one very soon.